Jake Morrison stood on the hot sand and looked at the 12 alien cadets in front of him. The desert planet Zarium Prime stretched out in all directions with nothing but sand dunes and rocks as far as anyone could see. 2 bright suns burned overhead, making the air shimmer like water. Jake wiped sweat from his face and checked his watch. It was almost noon and the temperature had already reached 50 degrees. The alien cadets came from 4 different worlds and they all looked very different from each other. 3 of them were Zephyrians who looked like walking crystals that caught the sunlight and threw it back in rainbow colors. Their leader was a female named Zara who seemed confident and calm. The crystals on her body glowed with a soft blue light that meant she was using her natural cooling system. 4 cadets were a quarry from a water world. They had thick blue-green skin that looked wet even in the dry desert air. Their leader Finn kept touching his neck where gills opened and closed. All the Aquari had big round eyes that blinked sideways. They carried extra water, but Jake knew it would not last long in this heat. 2 cadets were Thrix insects that stood on 6 legs and had hard shells covering their bodies. The twins Kix and Nix made clicking sounds when they talked to each other. Their shells were dark green and had patterns that helped them hide. Jake had read that Thrix blood had special chemicals that stopped them from freezing. The last 3 cadets were Verdani plant people. They looked like walking trees with bark skin and leaves for hair. Their leader Grove was the tallest of all the cadets. His bark was brown and rough and his leaf hair moved even when there was no wind. Verdani could go to sleep for days or weeks when they needed to save energy. Jake carried only a small pack with basic supplies. He had water for 2 days, some dried food, a knife, rope, and a fire starter. The alien cadets had similar packs, but they also trusted their natural abilities to keep them alive. Jake had been teaching survival skills for 20 years, and he knew that trusting only in natural gifts could be dangerous. The mission was simple but hard. They had to survive in the Zarian desert for 3 days and 3 nights, using only what they carried and what they could find. The desert was one of the hardest places in the galaxy to stay alive. During the day, the heat could cook anyone who was not careful. During the night, the cold could freeze even the strongest beings. Jake started walking and the cadets followed him. The sand was hot enough to burn through their boots, so they had to keep moving. He led them towards some rocks that would give shade when the suns got higher. As they walked, Jake pointed out things they should remember. He showed them which rocks held water when the morning dew formed. He pointed to animal tracks in the sand that meant there was life nearby. Zara asked why they needed to learn old survival ways when they had technology and natural abilities. Jake smiled and told her that the desert did not care about technology or evolution. He said that Zarian Prime had killed many beings who thought they were safe because of their advantages. The group reached the rocks and Jake showed them how to set up a basic camp. He made them practice building shelters from the rocks and finding the best places to stay cool. The alien cadets thought the work was too simple, but they followed his instructions. As the day got hotter, Jake watched the sky. He had been on Zarian Prime many times before and he knew the signs to look for. The air had a strange smell and the horizon seemed to bend in ways that were not normal. Small animals that lived in the rocks had gone quiet and hidden. These were all warning signs that the cadets did not know about. Finn asked about water and Jake showed them how to find moisture under certain rocks. The Aquari was worried because his people needed more water than others. Jake told him that panic was the biggest killer in the desert. He said that smart thinking and calm actions would keep them alive better than any natural ability. The Thrix twins, Kix and Nix, found some dried plants and asked if they could eat them. Jake looked at the plants carefully and said no. He explained that many desert plants were poison and could kill quickly. He showed them safe plants that looked similar and told them to always ask before eating anything. Grove, the Verdani leader, stood very still and seemed to be listening to something the others could not hear. His leaf hair moved faster and his bark skin changed color slightly. Jake asked him what was wrong, but Grove said he was not sure. Something in the desert felt different, but he could not explain what it was. The afternoon sun beat down harder. and the alien cadets started to understand why the desert was so dangerous. Their natural cooling systems worked, but Jake could see they were using a lot of energy. He made them rest in the shade and drink small amounts of water often. He told them that the real test would come when the suns went down as evening approached. Jake gathered the cadets around him. He explained that Zarian Prime nights were deadly cold and that they would need to work together to survive. The temperature would drop from over 50 degrees to minus 40 degrees in just a few hours. He told them that many strong beings had died on Zarian Prime because they did not respect the night. The cadets seemed confident that their natural abilities would protect them. Zara said her crystal body could regulate temperature perfectly. Finn said his thick skin and internal heat systems would keep him warm. The Thrix twins said their antifreeze blood made cold weather easy. Grove said he could go into deep sleep and use almost no energy. Jake nodded, but his face looked worried. He had seen the signs all day and he knew something bad was coming. The electromagnetic storms of Zarian Prime were rare but deadly. When they hit, they could stop the natural abilities that the aliens depended on. Jake did not want to scare the cadets, but he started looking around the area for materials he might need. Old bones from dead animals lay scattered in the sand. Different types of rocks and sand were everywhere. Dried plants and wood pieces could be found. If someone knew where to look. As the first sun began to set, Jake felt the air pressure change. Storm clouds that glowed with strange purple light appeared on the horizon. The electromagnetic storm was coming, and the alien cadets had no idea how much danger they were about to face. The purple clouds moved faster than anyone expected. Jake watched the sky change color from orange to deep purple as strange lightning jumped between the clouds. The air started to smell like metal and electricity. All around them, small rocks began to glow with the same purple light as the storm clouds. Jake knew they had maybe 10 minutes before the electromagnetic storm hit with full power. Jake shouted for all the cadets to gather their gear quickly. He told them to move away from the metal objects in their packs and to get ready for something they had never experienced before. The alien cadets looked confused because they did not understand what an electromagnetic storm could do to their bodies. They thought their natural abilities would protect them from any weather. Zara stood tall and her crystal body glowed brighter as she prepared to use her temperature control. The crystals in her arms and legs pulsed with blue light as they worked to keep her body ready for the cold night ahead. Finn checked his gills and felt his thick skin getting ready to hold in body heat. The Thrix twins, Kix and Nix, felt their special blood moving through their bodies, preparing the antifreeze chemicals that would keep them alive in freezing temperatures. Grove closed his eyes and started the process that would let him sleep through the dangerous night. The first wave of the storm hit like a wall of invisible force. Purple lightning cracked across the sky, and the air filled with electricity that made everyone's hair stand up. Jake felt the energy wash over him, but humans were not affected the same way as other species. The alien cadets, however, began to change in ways that terrified them. Zara screamed as her crystal formations suddenly stopped glowing. The blue light that meant her temperature control was working flickered and went out. Her crystals became dull and gray like ordinary rocks. She touched her arms and legs, but the crystals felt cold and dead. For the first time in her life, Zara could not control her body temperature. She was just as helpless as any creature without special abilities. Finn felt his gills close up and refused to open. His thick skin that usually stayed flexible and warm became hard and brittle like old leather. When he touched his neck where his gills should be working, he felt only dry, rough skin. The internal heating system that his people had used for thousands of years simply stopped working. Finn looked at his hands and saw that his blue-green skin was turning pale and gray. The Thrix twins had the most frightening experience of all. Kix felt his antifreeze blood become thick and slow. Nix watched as his hard protective shell started to crack in places it had never cracked before. Both twins felt their bodies getting colder as their special blood chemistry failed them. The chemicals that should have kept them warm in any cold weather were gone as if they had never existed. Grove tried to enter his deep sleep state, but nothing happened. His bark skin stayed the same color, and his leaf hair continued to move in the wind. The ancient ability that let his people survive anything by sleeping through danger was completely gone. Grove felt helpless and afraid in a way no Verdani had felt for centuries. Jake watched all of this happen and knew exactly what was coming next. Zarian Prime's electromagnetic storms were famous for shutting down biological adaptations. The energy field disrupted the electrical systems in alien bodies that controlled their special abilities. Most species in the galaxy had never experienced anything like it because electromagnetic storms were very rare on other planets. The storm grew stronger and purple. Lightning struck the ground all around them. Each lightning strike left the air smelling like burned metal. The alien cadets huddled together in fear as they realized their natural gifts were completely gone. They were now just ordinary beings facing one of the most dangerous nights in the galaxy with no protection. Jake looked at the cadets and saw panic starting to build in their eyes. Zara was shivering even though the air was still warm from the day. Finn kept touching his neck looking for gills that would not open. The Thrix twins held each other as their shells continued to crack. Grove stood very still, but Jake could see terror in his plant-like face. The first sun disappeared behind the horizon, and immediately the temperature began to drop. On most planets the change would be slow, but Zarian Prime was different. The temperature fell fast and steady like water running out of a broken container. In 30 minutes it would be below freezing. In an hour it would be cold enough to kill anyone not prepared for it. Jake opened his pack and pulled out thermal blankets for everyone. The blankets were made to help, but they were not enough for a Zarian Prime night when the temperature dropped to -40 degrees. The alien cadets wrapped themselves in the blankets, but Jake could see they were already starting to shake from cold. Zara asked Jake what they were going to do. Her voice was small and scared, which was very different from the confident cadet who had started the day. Jake looked around at the materials scattered across the desert. He saw old animal bones that had been bleached white by the suns. He saw different types of sand and rock formations. He saw dried plants and pieces of old wood. Jake told the cadets to stay calm and follow his instructions exactly. He said that humans had survived on planets just as dangerous as Zarian Prime for thousands of years before they had any technology. He explained that what they needed was not special abilities or advanced equipment, but old knowledge and clever thinking. The cadets looked at Jake like he was crazy. How could old human survival tricks save them when their own evolved abilities had failed? Finn asked what bones and sand could do against the killing cold of Zarian Prime. Jake smiled and told them they were about to learn why humans were known across the galaxy for surviving impossible situations. Jake started gathering materials and told each cadet what to collect. He sent Zara to find the largest animal bones she could carry. He told Finn to gather 3 different types of sand that Jake pointed out. The Thrix twins were sent to collect rocks of specific sizes and shapes. Grove was asked to find every piece of dried plant material and old wood in the area. As they worked, the temperature continued to drop and the electromagnetic storm raged overhead. Purple lightning lit up the desert and made strange shadows dance across the sand. The alien cadets moved quickly because they could feel the cold starting to bite through their thermal blankets. Jake began to arrange the materials in ways that made no sense to the others. He sorted bones by size and shape. He tested different sand types with his hands. He examined rocks carefully before putting them in specific piles. To the alien cadets it looked like Jake was just playing with desert trash while they slowly froze to death, but Jake had a plan that came from thousands of years of human survival knowledge. He knew how to use simple materials to create complex solutions. The bones were not just old animal remains to him. The sand was not just ground-up rock. Every material around them had properties that could be used to build something that would save their lives. The second sun touched the horizon and the real cold was about to begin. The temperature dropped so fast that frost began forming on the thermal blankets. Jake could see his breath in the air and knew they had less than an hour before the cold became deadly. The alien cadets were shaking badly now and their movements were getting slow and clumsy. Jake had to work fast, and he had to make sure the cadets understood what he was doing so they could help. Jake knelt in the sand and started digging with his hands. He told the cadets to make a circle about 3 meters wide and dig down until they reached sand that felt different from the surface sand. Zara asked why they were digging holes when they should be finding shelter. Jake explained that the earth itself was their shelter if they knew how to use it. As they dug, Jake sorted through the bones that Zara had collected. He found long, straight bones from the legs of large desert animals. He found curved ribs that could form arcs. He found flat skull pieces that could work as platforms. Each bone had a specific purpose in the structure he was planning to build. Finn brought the 3 types of sand that Jake had requested. One type was fine and powdery like flour. Another type was rough with sharp edges that felt like tiny pieces of glass. The third type was somewhere in between and felt smooth when rubbed between fingers. Jake showed Finn how each type of sand had different properties that would help them survive. The Thrix twins, Kix and Nix, carried rocks that Jake had chosen very carefully. Some rocks were heavy and dense, which meant they could hold heat for a long time. Other rocks were light with holes in them, which meant air could move through them easily. Jake explained that rocks were not just rocks when you understood how they worked. Grove gathered dried plants and pieces of old wood that had been left by previous storms. Jake looked at each piece and sorted them into piles. Some plants burned fast and hot, which was good for starting fires. Other plants burned slow and steady, which was good for keeping fires going. The wood pieces were sorted by how long they would burn and how much heat they would make. Jake took the longest bones and began pushing them into the sand around the edge of the circle they had dug. He angled the bones so they leaned toward the center of the circle and would meet at the top like the frame of a dome. The alien cadets watched as Jake fitted smaller bones between the large ones to create a skeleton structure that looked like the ribs of some giant animal, but the bone structure was only the beginning of Jake's plan. He showed the cadets how to weave smaller bones and dried plant stems between the larger bones to create a framework that air could move through, but that would hold the sand and rocks they would add later. The alien cadets began to see that Jake was not just piling bones together randomly, but was building something complex and planned. Jake started with the sand layers, and this was where his years of survival training really showed. He packed the fine powdery sand against the bottom of the bone structure to create a barrier that would stop cold air from coming up through the ground. Above that, he added the rough, sharp sand, which created tiny air pockets that would trap warm air. On top of that, he used the smooth sand, which would conduct heat from their bodies, and spread it around the shelter. The rocks were placed in specific locations around and inside the bone framework. The heavy, dense rocks were positioned where they would catch heat from the fire Jake planned to build and then release that heat slowly through the night. The light rocks with holes were placed where they would allow air to move through the shelter without letting heat escape. Zara asked how bones and sand could possibly keep them warm when the temperature was already below freezing and still dropping fast. Jake pulled out one of the hollow bones and showed her how air could move through it like a tube. He explained that the bone structure was not just holding up sand, but was creating pathways for warm air to flow throughout the shelter. Jake began building the fire system, and this was the most clever part of his design. Instead of just making one fire in the center of the shelter, he created multiple small fires in different locations. Each fire was built in a depression lined with the heat-holding rocks. The fires were connected by channels made from hollow bones so that warm air could flow from one fire location to another, but Jake did not stop there. He used more hollow bones to create air channels that would carry warm air throughout the sand layers. The warm air would heat the sand, which would then hold that heat and release it slowly. The alien cadets began to understand that Jake was not just building a simple shelter, but was creating a heating system that used the basic laws of physics. Finn watched as Jake used dried plants to start the fires using only friction and the tools in his basic kit. Jake showed him how different plants caught fire at different temperatures and how to arrange them so that one fire would light the next fire, which would light the next fire. Soon warm air was flowing through the bone channels and heating the sand layers. The Thrix twins helped Jake add the final layers to the shelter. More bones were woven into the framework to create walls that would keep wind out but allow air to circulate. Sand was packed around these bones in patterns that created insulation while still allowing the heating system to work. The twins were amazed at how every piece had a purpose and how the whole structure worked together. Grove helped Jake create the entrance to the shelter. Instead of just leaving an opening, they built a tunnel entrance that curved down and then up again. Jake explained that this would create an airlock that would keep cold air from flowing directly into the shelter while still allowing them to get in and out. As Jake worked, he explained to the cadets why humans had become so good at this type of survival engineering. He told them that Earth was a planet that tried to kill humans in every possible way. Humans had lived through ice ages where the whole planet was frozen. They had survived in deserts hotter than Zarian Prime. They had lived in jungles full of poison and predators. Jake said that other species evolved special abilities to handle one type of environment. Humans evolved the ability to change any environment to fit their needs. He explained that human survival was not about being stronger or faster or having better natural abilities. Human survival was about looking at any situation and figuring out how to use whatever was available to stay alive. The alien cadets were no longer shaking from the cold. The shelter was working exactly as Jake had planned. Warm air flowed through the bone channels and heated the sand layers, which released heat steadily throughout the structure. The multiple fire system provided heat without using too much of their fuel. The rock thermal mass system stored heat that would last through the long cold night. Jake checked his watch and saw that the temperature outside was now minus 30 degrees and still dropping. Inside the shelter, it was warm enough that they could remove their thermal blankets. The alien cadets looked at their human instructor with new respect and wonder. They had thought that surviving Zarian Prime required advanced technology or special evolved abilities. Instead, they learned that surviving Zarian Prime required understanding how heat moved through materials and knowing how to use simple tools to create complex solutions. They were beginning to understand why humans were considered the best survival instructors in the galaxy. Inside the bone and sand shelter, the alien cadets sat in a circle around Jake as the Zarian Prime night reached its coldest point. Outside, the wind howled and the temperature had dropped to minus 40 degrees, but inside they were warm and safe. The electromagnetic storm continued to rage overhead with purple lightning still crackling across the sky, but they could barely hear it. Through the thick walls of their shelter, Jake used the warm light from their small fires to teach the cadets about human survival philosophy. He explained that most species looked at hostile environments and asked how they could change themselves to survive. Humans looked at hostile environments and asked how they could change the environment to make it safe for humans to live. Zara touched the bone framework above her head and marveled at how strong and flexible it was. She asked Jake how he knew that animal bones could be used this way. Jake told her that humans had been building shelters from bones for thousands of years, starting back when humans lived in caves and had no technology at all. He explained that human ancestors had lived through ice ages by learning to use mammoth bones and animal hides to create warm shelters. Jake showed Zara how the curved bones distributed the weight of the sand and rocks evenly so that the shelter would not collapse even in strong wind. He pointed out how the bones were fitted together without any metal fasteners or glue, but still created joints that were strong and flexible. Zara realized that what looked like primitive construction was actually sophisticated engineering based on understanding how forces worked. Finn was fascinated by the sand layering system that kept them warm. Jake explained how the different types of sand created barriers that trapped air, and how trapped air was one of the best insulators in nature. He showed Finn how the fine sand at the bottom stopped cold from coming up through the ground, while the rough sand in the middle created thousands of tiny air pockets that held warm air. Jake told Finn that humans had learned these techniques by surviving in places where the ground was frozen solid for most of the year. He explained how Eskimo people on Earth built igloos from ice and snow that were warmer inside than outside even when the outside temperature was far below freezing. The secret was understanding how to use the insulating properties of air trapped in the right materials. The Thrix twins, Kix and Nix, were amazed by the air circulation system that moved warm air throughout the shelter. Jake showed them how the hollow bones created pathways for air to flow and how the placement of the bones controlled where the warm air went. He explained that good air circulation prevented carbon dioxide from building up while making sure heat reached every part of the shelter. Jake told the twins that humans had learned about air circulation by studying how prairie dogs and other burrowing animals designed their underground homes. He said that humans were very good at watching how nature solved problems and then improving on those solutions. The twins realized that human survival techniques combined observation of nature with creative engineering. Grove was most interested in the thermal mass system that stored heat in the rocks and released it slowly through the night. Jake showed him how the dense rocks near the fires absorbed heat during the day and evening and then gave off that heat for hours after the fires burned low. He explained how the rocks were positioned to create currents of warm air that flowed throughout the shelter. Jake told Grove that humans had used thermal mass heating for thousands of years in many different ways. He described how some human cultures built homes with thick stone walls that absorbed heat from the sun during the day and kept the houses warm all night. He explained how other humans used heated stones as portable heaters that could keep them warm for hours. As the night continued, Jake shared stories of famous human survivors who had lived through impossible situations using nothing but intelligence and determination. He told them about explorers who survived months in the Arctic by building shelters from ice and catching fish through holes in frozen lakes. He described mountain climbers who survived avalanches by digging snow caves and rationing their food for weeks. Jake explained that the key to human survival was never giving up and always looking for solutions. He said that humans had a saying that there was always a way if you were smart enough and determined enough to find it. The alien cadets began to understand that human survival was not just about knowing techniques but about having a mindset that refused to accept defeat. The cadets asked Jake about their own species and why they had evolved to depend on special abilities instead of developing human-style adaptability. Jake explained that their worlds had been much more stable than Earth. The Zephyrian crystal worlds had steady temperatures and no electromagnetic storms. The Aquari water worlds had consistent environments with no extreme weather. The Thrix hive worlds were controlled climates with no dangerous variations. The Verdani forest worlds had slow, seasonal changes that could be predicted. Jake told them that Earth was different because it was a planet of constant change and constant danger. Humans evolved during ice ages and volcanic periods and climate shifts that killed most other species. Humans learned to survive by being ready for anything and being able to adapt to any situation. Jake said that this made humans excellent allies because they could go anywhere and survive anything. As the night wore on, Jake maintained the fire and heating system. He showed the cadets how to read the signs that told them when to add fuel and when to adjust the airflow. He taught them to feel the temperature changes in different parts of the shelter and understand what those changes meant. He showed them how to conserve fuel while keeping the heating system running efficiently. The alien cadets took turns helping Jake with the fire maintenance and learned that even this simple task required skill and knowledge. They learned how different materials burned at different rates and gave off different amounts of heat. They learned how to arrange fuel so that fires would burn steadily without needing constant attention. They learned how to read smoke and flame colors to understand how well the fires were working. Jake talked about the importance of staying calm and thinking clearly during survival situations. He explained that panic killed more people than cold, or heat or lack of food. He told them that the human brain worked best under pressure when it was trained to focus on solutions instead of problems. The cadets realized that mental discipline was just as important as physical techniques. As dawn approached, the alien cadets felt their natural abilities starting to return as the electromagnetic storm weakened. Zara felt her crystals beginning to glow again. Finn felt his gills starting to work. The Thrix twins felt their antifreeze blood warming up. Grove felt his hibernation ability coming back online. But they also realized that they had learned something much more valuable than just surviving one night on Zarian Prime. They had learned to see the world the way humans saw it. They had learned to look at any collection of materials and see possibilities instead of limitations. They had learned that intelligence and determination could overcome almost any obstacle. Jake checked the outside temperature and saw that it was still minus 35 degrees. But inside their shelter, built from bones and sand and simple materials, it was warm and comfortable. The alien cadets looked at their human instructor with new respect and understanding. They were beginning to comprehend why humans had become such important members of the Galactic Defense Academy and why human survival instructors were requested by species from across the galaxy. The twin suns of Zarian Prime rose slowly over the desert horizon, painting the sky in brilliant orange and red colors. Jake felt the air pressure change as the electromagnetic storm finally moved away from their area. Purple lightning still flickered in the distance, but the immediate danger was over. The alien cadets began to feel their natural abilities returning as the storm's influence faded. Jake opened the tunnel entrance of their bone and sand shelter and stepped outside into the morning air. The temperature was still below freezing, but warming quickly as the suns climbed higher. Frost covered everything in sight, making the desert look like a world made of diamonds. Jake breathed the cold air and smiled, because all 12 cadets had survived the most dangerous night on one of the most hostile planets in the galaxy. The cadets emerged from the shelter one by one and stood in the morning sunlight looking at the structure that had saved their lives. From the outside it looked like a simple mound of sand and bones, but they now understood the sophisticated engineering that was hidden beneath the surface. Zara ran her hands along the bone framework and marveled at how each piece served multiple purposes. Jake began dismantling the shelter piece by piece and used each component to teach the cadets more lessons. He showed them how the long leg bones had not only provided structural support, but had also acted as thermal conductors that moved heat from the fire areas to the cold areas of the shelter. The bones had been positioned to create the maximum heat transfer with the minimum amount of material. Finn helped Jake remove the sand layers and saw how each type of sand had performed exactly as Jake had predicted. The fine sand at the bottom had created an almost perfect cold barrier. The rough sand in the middle had trapped warm air in thousands of tiny pockets. The smooth sand on top had distributed body heat evenly throughout the shelter walls. Jake explained to Finn that understanding materials was one of the most important human survival skills. He said that humans had learned to test and categorize every substance they encountered so they would know how to use it when survival depended on making the right choice. Finn realized that what seemed like magic was actually applied science. Based on careful observation and testing, the Thrix twins helped Jake disassemble the air circulation system and were amazed at how simple it was in concept, but how effective it had been in practice. The hollow bones had created pathways for air movement that prevented carbon dioxide buildup while distributing heat efficiently throughout the shelter. Jake showed them how the bone placement had been calculated to create optimal airflow patterns. Jake told Kix and Nix that humans had learned air circulation principles by studying caves and animal burrows and then improving on what nature had already figured out. He explained that humans were excellent at taking natural solutions and making them better through engineering and creative thinking. The twins understood that human survival techniques combined respect for nature with human innovation. Grove helped Jake remove the thermal mass rocks and learned how each rock had been chosen for specific properties. The dense rocks had stored heat during the evening and released it slowly through the cold night. The porous rocks had allowed air circulation while still providing thermal mass. Jake showed Grove how the rock placement had created convection currents that moved warm air throughout the shelter. Jake explained to Grove that thermal mass heating was used in human architecture all over Earth and on human colonies throughout the galaxy. He described how human engineers had taken the basic principle of storing heat in dense materials and developed it into sophisticated heating systems for buildings and spacecraft. Grove realized that simple survival techniques often became the foundation for advanced technology. As they packed their gear, Jake talked about the bigger lessons that the night had taught them. He explained that the difference between humans and other species was not that humans were smarter or stronger, but that humans approached problems differently. Most species tried to adapt themselves to their environment, while humans adapted their environment to their needs. Jake said that this difference came from human evolution on a planet that was constantly changing and constantly dangerous. Humans had lived through ice ages and volcanic periods and climate shifts that would have killed species that depended only on biological adaptations. Humans survived by learning to use tools and techniques that could work in any environment. Zara asked Jake how humans had developed such confidence in their ability to solve any problem. Jake smiled and told her that human confidence came from thousands of years of surviving impossible situations. He explained that every human child grew up hearing stories of human ancestors who had lived through disasters and dangers that seemed impossible to survive. Jake said that human culture taught that there was always a solution if you were smart enough and determined enough and creative enough to find it. He explained that this belief was so strong in human thinking that most humans never even considered the possibility that a problem might not have a solution. This mindset made humans excellent at finding ways to survive when other species gave up. Finn asked why other species in the galaxy wanted to learn human survival techniques when they had their own natural abilities. Jake explained that biological abilities could fail or be disrupted as they had learned during the electromagnetic storm. But human techniques worked in any situation because they were based on universal physical principles that never changed. Jake told Finn that many species had joined the Galactic Defense Academy specifically to learn from human instructors. He said that human survival and engineering skills had saved entire colonies when natural disasters or equipment failures left them without their normal resources. The galaxy had learned that having humans on your team meant having people who could solve problems that seemed impossible. The Thrix twins asked Jake if he thought humans were better than other species. Jake shook his head and explained that every species had valuable abilities and perspectives. He said that humans were good at survival and adaptation, but other species were better at many other things. The key was learning from each other and combining different strengths. Jake told the twins that the best military units in the galaxy were mixed species teams where each member contributed their natural abilities, while also learning human survival techniques as backup skills. He said that diversity made teams stronger because different ways of thinking led to better solutions. Grove asked Jake what advice he would give to young cadets who wanted to develop human-style survival abilities. Jake said the most important thing was to develop curiosity about how everything worked. He explained that humans survived by understanding their environment completely, and then finding creative ways to use what was available. Jake told Grove that the second most important thing was to practice staying calm under pressure. He said that panic shut down the thinking processes that were needed to find solutions. Human survival training taught people to control their fear and focus their minds on the problem instead of the danger. As they prepared to signal for extraction, Jake gathered all the cadets around him for one final lesson. He told them that they had learned more than just how to survive on Zarian Prime. They had learned to think like humans, which meant looking at any situation and asking not whether it was survivable, but how to make it survivable. Jake explained. But this way of thinking would help them throughout their military careers and their lives. He said that officers who could find solutions when standard procedures failed were valuable to any military force. The ability to adapt and improvise and overcome was useful in any situation from combat to exploration to disaster relief. The electromagnetic storm had completely passed, and the cadets felt their natural abilities fully restored, but they also knew that they now had backup skills that would work even if their biological advantages failed them again. They had learned that human techniques were not just primitive survival methods, but were sophisticated applications of engineering and science. As the rescue ship appeared in the sky, Jake made his final notes in his training report. He wrote that the exercise had been successful and that all cadets had learned the fundamental human military doctrine of improvise, adapt, and overcome. He noted that the alien cadets now understood why humans were considered essential partners. In any challenging mission, the cadets looked back at the desert, where they had nearly died and where they had learned to survive using nothing but bones and sand and human knowledge. They knew they would never again underestimate the power of human ingenuity and determination. They had learned that being human meant never accepting that a situation was hopeless as long as there were materials to work with and problems to solve.